Hawks continued what's become a fairly generous trend this season, playing their opposition back into form, Freo cruising to a 69-point win. It was a step backwards in the eyes of many fans, and the road gets harder this week with Hawthorn set to take on Melbourne at the MCG. Plenty to get to in this edition of the Hawk Talk podcast. My name is Nick Mason, and with me as always is my co-host, a man who I imagine was equally apprehensive about watching the replay of what was a disappointing performance. G'day, Tiz.
G'day, mate. Yeah, no, it was a disappointing performance, but it was one I felt was coming. For a young side like this, doing the travel we've been doing, resting a couple of blokes that obviously needed some rest in Bruce and CJ, it just sort of felt like something like this was going to happen. If it was going to happen, it was going to be off Broadway where the fans weren't. And Freo have been looking for an easy target for a while, and they got it.
Well, I tend to agree. I just thought that this kind of loss was in the post, maybe a week later against Melbourne. Because, I mean, they're the premiership contenders, right? They're going for it this year, yet again. And Fremantle are not much chop, but it happened the way that it happened. And, yeah, as you say, it was due sometime. I just thought maybe it was going to be a week later than it was.
Well, as we speak, they're going back to the tribunal, Melbourne, because they need that extra forward against us. They are worried, champ. They've got to play us and Freo the next 2 weeks, and I don't think they can get past them without Van Rooyen, or whatever his name is. So, maybe we've got a better look this week than you think.
No, it's about the fabric of the game, mate. It's about what's right.
Absolutely. That's why we always go to the cricket, AFL. That's it.
So much conjecture about the fabric of the game this week. It's out of control. The parameters of the pantomime have changed, mate. You can't do anything anymore. You pay your money. You should be able to do what you want.
I agree.
I'm being completely disingenuous. I don't think that's true. But I also don't want to get wrapped up in a debate about booing, because I've had a gutful of it this week. I've had enough.
Oh, thank goodness for that, because I was just about to boo the old idea of actually going ahead with that. It should be a lot of fun on Saturday afternoon.
What evidence do you have to back that up?
No, that's just my nervous attitude about going along to the MCC when Melbourne are actually looking like they might win one.
Look, we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves. We do need to talk about this game. It wasn't fun for the most part. It wasn't fun catching up on it. I had a pretty good Saturday evening, and then knowing what was awaiting me the next day in the form of the replay, I wasn't looking forward to it. I did notice that Harry Morrison came in for a bit of flack from supporters, but that was interesting. 24 touches at 75% disposal efficiency. Team high 551 metres gained, 8 marks. That was second only to Blake Hardwick. 5 inside 50s, 3 score involvements. The same amount of clangers as Newcombe and Day. So I was sort of left wondering, why him? Why was he the target?
I'll tell you why, because it looks like he's got more time and space than Newcombe and Day.
Okay, all right. Yeah, he plays on the outside. And there were a couple of things that I did see where he clearly had time to weigh it up. That out of bounds on the full was pretty inexcusable.
So the big headline for me out of this game, probably if you look back on it at the end of the year, and we're not going to, but, oh no, we do, don't we? We do that. We have a whole podcast looking back. But for this game, the note would be Worpel MVP, and Lloyd Meek turns up and makes it look like he could be an AFL ruckman for us.
Yeah, that's true. A little bit of conjecture around Worpel, though, because although he was voted MVP, running at 48% efficiency, another example, mate, of the highlights package being cleverly cut together just to obscure where those footies actually landed.
Yeah. That's how it's happening this year. Look, we're fantastic in the clinches. We get the ball. It's just that possession after you've collected it to the outside or even to the. It's either hot potato or immediate turnover generally, and that's what happened with Freo. And we used to do it when we were really good. We'd let the opposition get the footy, then we'd get it back in space and just make them look really, really quite ordinary. And that's what happened, because if you're getting the ball on the outside, as Freo were, interception or otherwise, then they have complete rule over how they're going to use it. They can construct a play, and they did quite readily create holes in our defence.
Yeah, I thought they did really well, actually. We did have a couple of shining lights. I think Will Day, 26 touches and 7 clearances was pretty good. Your boy Connor Nash just keeps on turning up. 26 touches himself at 84.6% disposal efficiency.
Oh, it's so good to see some consistency. Like, I'm just wrapped for him. But I was really wrapped for Miki, 80% game time, and he was the top Supercoach scorer with only 12 touches. Like, I was like, what's going on here?
Should we be a little bit concerned about that, or?
I really don't know how that works, but he laid 2 tackles, he had 2 clearances, 8 contested, 6 uncontested, 6 marks, and 3 intercept marks, which is the main highlight for me. The intercept marks are important for this side.
I am somewhat shocked. I'm taken aback that you would cut in on Connor Nash's stats, mate. I had more to tell you about how good a game he played. If you'd let me...
Look, it's becoming a little bit passé to say how good Connor Nash is now.
Connor Nash, old news.
What about McDonald? He played well.
Let me tell you about Connor, because he had a team-high 8 tackles. 3 of them were inside 50. Now, the reason I bring it up...
Are they the only 3 inside 50?
Well, he had the most of the team for that stat, 3 tackles inside 50. The team had a total of 4.
Wow. Well done, Wings. He obviously had the other one, did he?
I'm actually not sure. I'd have to look it up. But Freo had 12 to our 4, which I thought was disappointing. Nash also led the way for pressure acts, posting 21. Now, that's kind of low. 21 should give you an idea of the pressure we actually brought to Freo. It's not that great. And to wrap up this little segment on Nash, indulgent for your tears, he had 3 score involvements as well. So I thought it was a pretty good game.
Did he have many free kicks against? I noticed we lost the free kick contest again. I mean, not contest, count. That's right, free kick count again.
Yeah, 21-10 in Freo's favour. I think ill discipline really cost us early in the game. It became a narrative throughout the whole thing. But not only that, it was turnovers from defenders that proved costly too.
The differential in pressure between what our backline was experiencing and what their backline was experiencing was ridiculous.
Exactly right. And we just can't afford to be that lax, not with the kind of forward efficiency that we have. I mean, as Mitchell pointed out in the presser, by half-time we had 29 inside 50s for just 8 scores. This is becoming also a recurring narrative in our season where the midfield's going great guns. We've improved that area of the ground beyond what I imagined. I think we're doing really well there, but there's no connection. We're just not making the most of that.
Also, that forward line, as much as Mitch Lewis is playing well and looks good and is definitely the go-to guy, it's really disrupted the other guys around him. Like Green, he had a great moment in the first few minutes, and then after that, obviously... Like, is he being too reverential to Lewis, or, he needs to just tell Lewis to park his bike somewhere else at times, I think, because he needs to back himself. I mean, we noticed it at Box Hill even.
Yeah.
That he would let others, because he's such a team-minded player, that he'd let others take the mark, or he'd let them take the lead when it really should have been him. He's obviously the best forward at that point. And now we're seeing a similar thing where Mitch Lewis is obviously top dog, but Mitch needs to turn to him and go, "Hey, you got to come along for the ride as well." It's a two-way street here, and I just think they got to gel a bit better. He wasn't injured, was he at all? Green. It was a sad tale behind the footy. I thought the back line was shown up quite easily, actually.
We're just going to get to some miscellaneous listener questions. This first one from Aidan. In Sam's first season, we established our rebound off the back 50. In his second season, we've added a strong stoppage game. What's the next string that needs to be added to the game plan next season? I feel that team defence is desperately needed, along with scoring power.
Team defence and scoring power? Diametrically opposite.
Yeah, well, I suppose so.
And I was a bit bored on the Sunday, still, recovering from the late night exploits of the LSO, at Hamer Hall. Just a fantastic evening. Didn't get to sleep, mate. It was so exciting.
They know how to party. Before you know it, it's a third symphony, then a fourth, then a fifth.
Wow. And then I put on, who did St Kilda play? My goodness, I can't even remember. It's such a forgettable game.
North.
That has to be the worst game of football. St Kilda didn't even make the 40-point margin. That's just ridiculous.
No, it's been denounced as one of the worst games of the year.
Yeah, so, look, I think you can cop team defence, but Sammy's been talking about how the forward line's performing all this year, really, and they haven't got the mix right, they haven't got the structure right, they haven't got the ball movement right, they haven't got the running patterns right. A lot of things are going wrong forward of the footy, and it's not all about the delivery, because good forward lines can cope with poor delivery, not every week, but some weeks, okay? Because you're going to get beaten in the midfield every now and again. But, yeah, it's just not. And they're not even kicking the goals when they get the opportunities either. We're the worst in front of goal in the league, and, it's just not... It's not up to standard, okay? So they're going to need some really big changes, and I'm not sure it's available to them in personnel. Even with the mid-season draft, I don't think there's anyone they're going to pick up.
No, I'm glad you got out ahead of that, because that's my concern, is that we have, our injury list is populated very minimally at the moment. I think we've got 4 on the sidelines, and I'm just not sure if this is easily rectified right now. We've got almost a full hand of personnel available. We've got the ability to make changes, but what changes do you make? If we're looking at scoring power...
I think they had the mix right with 2 rucks, 1 resting forward, I really do.
Yeah, well, there you go. I flagged that from the start of the season, but Jack is injured, Cozzy's out of form still. Besides that, I think Butler's earned a recall. We'll get to him a little bit later. But in terms of the key position forward is what we're crying out for, to complement Mitch, and we just don't have that right now. And then you look at the other end of the field, if we're talking purely defence, we need someone to relieve Sicily. He's been hung out to dry basically all season, and it doesn't seem like all of a sudden, I did not anticipate this, but Blanca's not the answer. I really thought he would improve this year and take his game to another level yet again, because he looked pretty serviceable last year.
Okay, so he's in, I want to explain what I think is going on with Blank. He's put on weight to meet AFL opponents, not such a big weight difference. I think one of the largest weight differences I saw in one-on-ones the other week was Rowbottom versus Dangerfield. It was about 25 kilos. Now, in the midfield, that's fairly obvious, but if you're putting on weight like James Blank has to try and combat the big gorilla forward, you're just not going to be fast. And that's his problem. He's got really slow.
I don't think he fits the mould of what Mitchell's trying to do, and so I think it's been natural to overlook him.
I think he does. He just needs to smarten up his speed, because your body has to adapt. He's still very young. I wouldn't be too worried about him. But there's some odd stuff going on in the twos, because you see DGB pushed forward as well. So we'll get to all that later. But James Blank, you don't feel he's the future now?
No. I won't go so far as to say that, but his development stalled. I thought he'd be getting a lot more opportunities than he has been, but it turns out that he's a lot more raw and greener prospect than I anticipated, and so what we have is just a limited number of levers to pull right now. I think we do need more scoring power. I think we do need to do something with our defence, but is it purely on adding to our list and rectifying those deficiencies in the soonest available convenience, which is not till, well, A, the mid-season draft, or B, the national draft or the trade period, in which case it's going to be rough, which I know is not news to Hawks fans, but in terms of how we can improve, it's going to be inconsistent for a while yet.
Oh, I think Blank will improve as he trains against Mitch Lewis. I think having no one to train against for the last few months hasn't been great for him.
We've got a question from Christian. We have no key position forwards besides arguably Mitch Lewis. What do we do? Reed is on the radar. Well, again, that question is, what do? We simply have to work with our deficiencies in terms of the list. We have to work with the fact that Jack is injured, Cozzy's out of form, and then who else besides those guys?
We knew this going into the season, and the coaching panel's known it. They left Jacker out of the lineup. Then he's been injured twice. Another hammy. Doesn't look good for him. Cozzy's confidence is still below his feet in terms of, it's just not. It's not happening for him as quickly as he'd like. Either you pick him and hope, because he should be above the level of VFL, or you do what they were doing in the preseason and you play 2 ruckmen, one of them rests forward, and when things are going badly, one of them rests back, and you just rely on your pace off the half-back flank, even though teams have worked out how to slow us down there to score if you've got too many behind the football. That's all we can do. That's it.
Views from the Nosebleeds wants to talk about Connor McDonald. Should we see more of him in the middle this week with Ward out? He's a midfielder, can find the footy, and has footy smarts.
Don't rush Connor, is what I'd say.
I think that is the long-term trajectory for him. I think the fact that we haven't really seen it, even at VFL level, tells me that it's probably not just going to happen like the flick of a switch.
I think it's got to do with his tank, to be honest.
Yeah, you could be right.
But, as an impact player, I think I'd rather Connor McDonald as an impact player than an out-and-out midfielder every week. He's certainly not a grunt midfielder. He's the type of midfielder you want caressing the ball down someone's throat in the forward line.
Yeah, I've seen that. I think he has the class to do that, and I'm enjoying him in his current role, actually. So I just want to see more of him in the AFL. I don't think it benefits him at this stage to be put back to the VFL. I want to see more of him. This question from Rob. Do we have too many mids and playing the likes of McDonald, Ward and Long out of position? Moore was fantastic in the midfield last year, but a shadow of himself as a permanent forward.
Long term, Moore is not going to be a midfielder. He has to work out. He's a leader up in that forward line that isn't functioning. And as a result of being a leader, he's probably trying to get other people into the game more than that. He's getting more attention. It's awfully hard for our forwards. They're not putting on pressure against their backmen. The ball's coming in at predictable angles. I mean, we see Long go down there, and he's like a randomizer, isn't he? Because he just sees ball and goes for it. There's no idea of what structure he should be holding, and it seems like that natural way of playing actually worked out quite well. But that's at a smaller ground in Adelaide, and he's just reacting to the moment. So, look, it's going to be difficult without Ward. I enjoy his game. He's a very, very dependable set of hands.
I think we've got options to replace him, and I'm excited to see how we do that. We'll get to the VFL soon. I think it's just through an excess of mids. I mean, you look at our draft hand from last year, which was just midfield central. We've stocked up, and that's in service of this experiment that we have on our hands this season. We're trying to develop an idea of what's our best mix. What's our plan A midfield? And I think we've already actually bedded that down. And what's the plan B and what's the plan C? Let's give us some options. And if that involves selecting these guys and having them occasionally have to play at half forward or half back, then so be it. Remember, you're thinking it's the long game that we're playing. So we're going to see some guys out of position for a little while, as long as we keep on wanting those rotations and wanting a different look at these combinations.
So it all centres around Worpel, really, like the midfield and where it's going and the future of the midfield. Is he going to be a luminary of our next midfield as it heads forward and a leader? Or
yeah, well, serious questions about that. We had one from Neil pointing out that Worpel has really regained form, which I agree with, but we now have a poor ball user getting a lot of touches in the centre. How much is this harming us, and what happens next?
Yeah, so if you've got nothing to kick to, it's going to look like... Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I understand that, and I'm not going to argue against that. I think that we regularly are out of options, and maybe we do need that dump kick sometimes. Maybe that's the only avenue we have left, but I think Worpel does that to a fault. It's his go-to.
And you can't hit the boundary line. You can't hit the boundary line anymore. Remember in years past, we'd go into defensive mode and then we'd just decide that we would reset in the forward half, and Lewis or Hodge or someone would just scrub a kick into the forward 50 and it'd dump over the line. Can't do that any longer.
Yeah, but you make that sound like it's a recent development. We're going on a decade since that golden era, mate. You've got to adjust.
Yeah, well, you can't really adjust, because this is what happens. If it's 6-6-6, you're not allowed to send it out of bounds. And you haven't got a forward line that's functioning well, or guys that can bring it to ground. It's going to get intercepted and it's going to come back to you really quick. Whereas in the past, you had more leeway. That's what I'm saying. That's because when people look at Worpel, they go, "Oh, why would he kick it there?" Well, he knows that he doesn't have a good option, but he's got to kick it somewhere.
Yeah, I'm not sure he looks most of the time. I'm going to study that closely going forward. I'm not convinced that he always weighs up the options. I think it's a a reflexive sort of mechanism that he has about his kicking.
And then you look at guys that come into the side, like we'll see Mackenzie come back in this week, I'd say, and he has a innate ability to hit guys on lees and blokes you don't expect. Sometimes they don't expect the footy to get to them as well as it does, which is just great to see and really enjoyable. But, look, there's a lot of pressure on Warps. I think he needs to embrace the pressure. I think in the past it's been very much a problem for him, and I think he can only get better from here. And I hope he stays with us.
Scamasaurus wonders if investing time in Warple is robbing some of the other guys that we have pushing for a spot.
What, Long or...
Well, Newcomb, Moore, Ward, McDonald, Mackenzie, they're all names that he nominates.
None of them are coming off the list. I don't see any of them as being better than Warple right now. Do you?
Not to the extent that Warple begins to miss games or anything. Not to the extent that Warple's not considered a key part of this midfield. I think he very much is. He's the most senior. He's the most experienced figure of that midfield, isn't he?
I think we still need two more out-and-out midfielders to get to the modern game standard. I think we still are too few rotations through there.
Yeah, no, you might be right. Next question from Paulie actually speaks to one of the points he made before. He wonders how much of it comes down to our forwards not reading the play as well as we might hope. Shouldn't a kick out of trouble work out roughly 50-50? Noting Warple's efforts this season have been super consistent, which is true.
So, in a struggling side, you got to look at the guys who are consistent, and then the guys that are improving, and then you look at the guys who are just middling. There's very few improving in the forward line. Most of the midfield has definitely improved. Some guys have gone beyond expectations. The back line is just holding together. There's no one shining there.
What did you make of my little exercise that I posted to Twitter the other day? A bit of a stock exchange inspired exercise. Whose stocks are going up, who's going down, and who's holding firm? Because I didn't run that past you, and I got some people going, yep, I agree with this, I disagree with that, and that's what the exercise is all about. I don't begrudge that at all.
Well, all it led to was to me was a question of the efficacy of Sicily's captaincy.
It's a fair question, isn't it?
Because we have had some terrific captains. When you comparatively, Sicily is very young to it, and like you said earlier, he's getting hung out to dry. He's got a bigger opponent every week, and usually the best opposition forward, and then he's meant to lead the team from the last line of defence as well, which is supremely hard for even the most. Like he hasn't even been in the leadership group for that long, so this is all new to him. I don't know. I felt most of it was pretty spot on. There were question marks about Bramble, whether he'd actually improved. You seem to think he had, but he had a terrible year last year, so it'd be hard not to improve off that.
Therein lies the point. The bar was low. I also feel like Sam Mitchell has him more in the frame in terms of here's a guy that's going to be one of our main men, and we're going to try to elevate him as such. Whether he's fulfilled that promise yet is somewhat debatable, but he is having a better year than last year. But I found it surprising doing that exercise for myself that I did notice by the end of it, I felt as though a large portion of our team had improved off last year, and yet obviously we are 18th. That didn't make sense to me.
That's the genius of making Chris Newman forward line coach.
Oh.
It's a little facetious, but it's obviously not working. It's going to take a few more weeks probably with Lewis back.
Well, fingers crossed. I think that having Lewis available again is a new element that they just haven't had him to work with. They need to work out how that looks. I think it's a damn shame because Newman did a wonderful job with the back line. Is it a case of it's just not the right fit in terms of coach? Is he just not able to get the best out of the forward line? I guess we'll wait and see. One final question before we move on to talking about Box Hill, and this one was a bit of a curveball in that it landed in our inbox.
It's an email to our inbox, and we were very lucky to see it, actually, because we don't check that very often.
No, well, we don't publicise it. We don't put out our email address or anything like that. It's usually just socials where you can contact us. Nevertheless, Matty found his way to our inbox. Hey, gents, big fan of the show, tuning in from Canada each week to get my footy fix. I'm finding it increasingly frustrating to watch Sam Frost these days. He frosts us 50-metre penalties, he frosts us momentum at times, he frosts us goals from silly mistakes and turnovers. How long will he keep frosting us in the future, do you reckon? Cheers, Matty.
Wow. So he is definitely coming in for some flack, Frosty. There's lots of moments where he just loses his head, or there's assumed pressure and he takes the wrong option. But consistently he is one of our better defenders, and there's no one going to push him out of the lineup, mate. That's just how it is.
Oh, I agree. I don't think anyone's coming for his spot, so Hawks fans better strap in.
And now Melbourne are going to get stuck into him again, as they do every year.
I just think we're at a place where, as supporters, we recognise that you got to take the bad with the good when it comes to Sam Frost. But right now, there's a lot of Hawks supporters saying, well, no, I actually don't want to take the bad anymore. I don't want Sam Frost in the lineup anymore. Get rid of him. But, as you say, Tiz, it just ain't going to happen. So you might as well strap in and just try and make the best of it as a Hawks fan, because Sam Frost is in the best 22. No one's coming for his spot. This is what we have. Some weeks it's going to be good. Some weeks it's going to be bad. Some quarters it's going to be good. Some quarters it's going to be bad. It's a wild ride when it comes to Sam Frost.
Can you imagine being the coach? Because you know what he's capable of. He's capable of very, very high defensive pressure. He's capable of taking a small. He's capable of taking a tall. He can run off the half-back line. You probably don't want him to, but he will at times. He's got decent skills most of the time, unless he's under pressure. Look, we've had far worse defenders get years of contracts at Hawthorn than Sam Frost. So it's just that the guys around him need to improve as well. Like how often do you see it's just Sam against two others? I mean, Hardwick had a good game too, but they're developing side. You're going to get these systemic problems. And what round are we? Round 8. My goodness, Well, they're going to get tired from here.
On to happier things, eh? Let's talk about the Box Hill Hawks, who had a 57-point win, almost 15 minutes past before the first goal of the game. And that's when the Bull Ants got some momentum, some seriously good momentum too. They looked very good. 25-3 at quarter time, Box Hill with lots of work to do. Suddenly, by half time, we were 32 points up. And then we cruised to a 57-point win.
It was a bit weird that it was a scoring end in that game, obviously, which you don't see in AFL anymore because all the stadiums are so well built. But Box Hill seem to have this bravado that they can come from anywhere to beat you, which is great. Love it.
Well, it all started with Sam Butler, who got on the board in the second term and immediately turned to talk trash to the opposition. And that just seemed to... He got back-to-back goals, actually. And that, in the second term, ignited the revival. He slotted 3 for that quarter, 10 score involvements by the final siren, and just a huge factor. Little John commented on how Butler got his goals. Some snaps, tackle pressure, a contested mark. And here we have a question from Benji, which I think is very much appropriate right now. What does Butler have to do to break into this side? Surely he gets a run over Wingard at the moment, assuming Bruce comes straight in for Brockman with his suspension. Tiz, do you want to see Sam Butler in the senior side?
I do, because he gives you energy. He gives you a stimulus within the game. He's capable of just giving you that second wind as a group, because he's very generous in how he plays the game and how he, brings guys with him. It's not really a leadership thing, but there's those guys in the side where when they're up and about, they make it easier to play.
Absolutely. I can identify that with Sam Butler, who is averaging 17 touches for Box Hill this season. He's had, I think, a couple of, well, not bags, because I reckon a bag of goals is over 5, but he's had 2 runs of 4 goals, another of 3. He's kicked a goal in every game that he's played. I don't know what more he can do, really. He's putting his hand up to play, and it's not like our forward line, is invulnerable as far as the selection table is concerned. We need answers, and I think Butler could be one of those answers.
Most of all, we need bloody pressure on the backs of the opposition. You can't keep going like this. Sam Butler's great, but this bloke is better.
Cam Mackenzie, he was tagged.
Was he?
Well, so says Little John. It's not something I noticed because he was in everything. He had a team-high 30 disposals, a team-high 8 tackles as well, and a goal, 6 uncontested marks. So if he was in fact tagged closely, he was able to shake that attention. Just a great attitude fueling a great overall game. This is a guy who's obviously very, very young, still very raw, but he wants back in this AFL side pronto.
You know how you look at players and you can tell they're trying? He doesn't look like he's trying. He just looks like a Rolls Royce out there. Ball comes to him.
In a way that defies his frame and overall look. He still looks very young and very boyish, but he's very much in control.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to undercut his industry. The amount of times he gets to the contest and doesn't get the ball is numerous, but he gets to the contest nearly every time, and his ability to spot the right option is fantastic. I can see why they dropped him, to get a bit more confidence and get the ball in his hand a bit more often. But, to go out and do 8 tackles, that is not what he sets his mind to, probably. That's not his game. But that is how invested he is in the result. It's great.
It was the right call to send him back there, and I think his attitude corresponding with that has been excellent as well. But speaking of great attitude, Max Ramsden dropped from the AFL side after his debut, deployed then as the number 1 ruck for Box Hill for the first time ever, and just rose to the challenge brilliantly. He had the right attitude, much like Mackenzie, as I said, 22 touches, kicked 2 goals too, an equal team high 11 clearances, really the dominant ruck on the ground with 35 hit-outs, and received 9 free kicks. So we'll tell you a little bit about what the opposition thought of him and where their anxieties were.
He's just hard to match up on. It's going to be delightful. Give him 2 or 3 years. That kid's going to be fantastic to watch.
Yeah, I perceive him as being a genuine forward threat.
Yeah.
That's going to give oppositions a lot of headaches. I know we're talking mostly about his ruck game in this instance, but after all, he did kick 2 goals too. Max Ramsden, in just about every game he plays, he finds the scoreboard. He's doing very well this season. I know people, there might be fans out there that lost a little bit of faith from his debut game, but that was a rough initiation. Let's call that for what it was.
If you're worried about that debut game, I challenge you to go back and see James Sisley's debut game. I think it was an Easter Monday against Geelong.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, jeez. Okay.
Yeah, I remember that. There's been a lot made of that with his interactions with Clarkson after the game as well. But, that's what spurred him on to such a good AFL career.
Yeah. It's about getting a taste, working out that that's what you want, and continuing on.
Speaking of Geelong, this guy we plucked from the Cattery in the off-season, Cooper Stevens. Little John described it as Stevens' best game for the club, and I'm inclined to agree. 26 touches, kicked 1 goal, 10 clearances. He's really starting to press his case. I still feel week to week he starts slow, but the way he's able to not lose confidence in that and find his way into the game has been really good to see.
Now, what about our dangerously good backman who was sent forward, DGB?
I would love to know the motivation behind doing that, because it wasn't like he was letting the team down. It wasn't, go and find some touch for God's sake. It was nothing about that.
Oh, it wasn't that?
Well, Box Hill were well in control, and I thought DGB had a pretty good start to the game, and he ended up with 15 touches at 92% disposal efficiency, a team-high 8 marks, some good intercept play, and he was fiery as always. That's what we've come to expect from Denver. I don't know why they sent him forward. They certainly didn't need to, Box Hill.
That last quarter, do we have the scoring end?
Yeah, we did.
DGB sent forward, and he doesn't kick a goal or anything, but he definitely had far more fun than if he would have been at the other end, Nick. I think that was quite clear. He was enjoying the contest. He was having a good time.
Yeah, well, you would too if your team was up by about 7 goals and you could pretty much have license to do what you wanted.
Well, I love to see that, and also it makes you feel it's good to be the hunter every now and again. Great to be the hunter rather than hunted. It's good.
I'm keen to see if it's an experiment that they revisit at some point. We won't get to know for a little while because we've got the bye coming up. Then a gauntlet awaits. So I don't know if they're going to experiment over the next 5 games against any of these teams, because 4 of our next 5 games for Box Hill are against teams currently inside the top 6. And that's a hell of a draw. I mean, this is ridiculous. First up is Southport.
That's going to be tough. But it's our home ground. Surely we can get that result. Then Essendon. They're not that good, are they?
No. Out of the 5 games, that's probably the game that we could be most optimistic about, I'd say.
Williamstown, Brisbane, and then Gold Coast. Who are leading the ladder?
Yeah, well, if you don't mind, that final fortnight there, Brisbane is currently second on the ladder. It's going to be tough.
So Southport getting that 20th licence, obviously they're pretty damn good.
They seem to be going well. I mean, they didn't show up in the grand final, but you can't knock them.
That's all right. AFL don't mind that. Not showing up in grand finals, that's fine.
The only sour note of this game for Box Hill is the fact that Emerson Jekker did a hammy. It was in the second quarter. He's out for a month minimum. If you go back and watch the vision, I'd encourage it, not for the hamstring, but a second or two later, Josh Bennett kicks a wonderful goal on the boundary, which kind of took the edge off.
Now, isn't he flying under the radar, Josh Bennett? My God. He's a good little player.
Yeah, it's a couple of the smaller blokes for Box Hill that are having a pretty good first season. It's Jack O'Sullivan and Josh Bennett, so I think we can feel pretty good about.
Well, Josh Bennett seems to have some kind of wonderful idea about where the ball should be going at every moment.
Completely agree.
I really enjoy his disposal, and I love his sense of goal and his sense of where the game is at. I have really high expectations for Josh.
We should turn our attention, speaking of all things Box Hill, who is pressing their case for the next senior game. It's Hawthorn versus Melbourne at the MCG, Saturday, 4:35pm. Our first home game at the MCG since round one. Yep, it's been 2 months, and we finally get a home game at the MCG.
So is McGuinness coming back? Because that would be my first thought, you know. He pulled down Melbourne's, they were heading towards a premiership, and then McGuinness went out to the wing and shut down their whole game plan, and all of a sudden they didn't win the cup. Fabulous. I love that storyline. Let's go with that. And
While I know we were all super impressed with Finn's job on Langdon last year, I would say that Finn at this point is well below that, and he's woefully out of touch at this stage. So I don't expect that to happen. Your boy Nash could be a candidate, but then we have to rob him out of the midfield and put him on the outside.
On the outside? Oh, whatever you say, Nick.
Oh, well, what I do know is that we have 2 guys coming out of the side. Josh Ward with a foot injury, the timeline of which is a bit ambiguous, but the club have said, nah, it's no problem, don't worry about it. Oh yeah, well, how long is he going to be out? Oh, it's a short-term issue. Yeah, what are you thinking, like a couple of weeks? Don't worry about it. Okay, so Ward's out with a foot complaint. Brockman has been suspended, which I thought was a little bit rubbish, but of course not the talk of the week. Who do you bring in?
So Mackenzie comes straight back in. Obviously Butler, you could bring him in for Brockman, but you got Bruce in the offing.
Yep, no, Bruce will come back. CJ's right to go. Mitchell reporting that both those guys have been playing a bit under duress by the sounds of it, not being able to get up for that first training session back after the weekend, and they've both had a break now, and they look cherry ripe, apparently.
And that was interesting to get that context on CJ after we sort of said that his game style had changed. He wasn't running off the half-back flank, he wasn't going for the big flying marks, and looked a shadow of his former self, so it's good to see him get a rest, and hopefully he can get back into that form that we know and love him for.
So I guess that's at least, we're thinking maybe even 4 changes.
Oh, all right. Well, I reckon they're going to bring in McGuinness. They've got to bring him in. He didn't play on the weekend. What was he doing? He's just sitting there in a trance thinking about Ed Langdon and how they're going to beat Melbourne again. I've convinced myself. It's going to happen, Nick. You were all over us beating Freo last week. I'm all over us beating Melbourne or drawing like we did in their premiership season.
I think that's the verge of delusional. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're a far worse chance than we were last week against Freo. But I will be heading along.
Oh, yeah. No, it'll be good fun. Actually, a home game.
Yeah, no, wonderful. So you got to head along to that. It's all about the journey, isn't it? It's all about progress. And, I had a taste of seeing Mitch live against the Bulldogs, Mitch Lewis. And I want a little bit more of that, please. I waited long enough to see Mitch in action this year. I need to see it again.
Now, you can't tell me the D's were impressive against Gold Coast either, so...
Oh, gosh, no. They escaped with the win there. They almost lost that one.
Now, we had a wonderful review on Apple Podcasts, which we both enjoyed reading.
Yeah, it's the pronunciation here that stumped me. I'm going to give it a crack. Hen Disney Bayan. If that is your name, I've crushed it. Well, then go, mate. If not, my apologies. The review says, love this show. Nick and Tiz, you always make me smile and think. I don't get to watch the games much these days, but as an avid listener to your show, I feel more informed about the Hawks than ever.
That's great to read. I've been reading a lot of stuff about just how poor the AFL, well, the deigned AFL media is performing for a lot of people and how much they're not enjoying that. So encourage others to turn to fan-based coverage.
Yeah, we've received a lot of feedback along those lines lately, and that's really lovely. And thank you for that review. That was 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, and it really makes our day whenever we happen to read something like that. It's a lovely review, so if you want to take a moment and if you enjoy our work and want to tell the world about that, that'd be awesome.
And we've got to reserve some gratitude to Damo, because he's just doing such a piss-poor job at covering Hawthorn that people turn away.
Exactly, yeah. They're more inclined to listen to us, which I am very grateful for. Word of advice, just don't look. If a journo's pissing you off, just tune out. You don't need it in your lives. There's a reason why on our socials I never do sliding doors anymore. I don't retweet Footy Classified. It's because I don't actually tune into them. I don't read any of that stuff either. So, that's been a big key to my enjoyment of this season.
You didn't see people trying to hold Kane Corns to his convictions about certain players this week? How interesting. Wasn't that thrilling?
I just think it's so tedious, and yeah, I've been able to discover what about the AFL media game that I enjoy and what detracts from my enjoyment, and I've just cut all that stuff loose. So thank you for everyone that's done the same and that's come over to us, and we're really grateful to have you, and you can join us online too. Our Hawk Talk Pod community grows every day, which is so great to see. You can get on board via Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. We'd love to have you there. And lastly, as always, a huge thanks from both of us here at Hawk Talk Pod HQ to our many proud, passionate and paid up Patreon subscribers. You guys play such a huge part in making this podcast everything that it is, in a very real sense. You help us put time into this show week in, week out. You help make it happen, so thanks for that. Now, for any of our listeners who haven't subscribed and you're keen to get on board and get access to some sweet bonus content for your troubles, do head to patreon.com/hawktalkpod for all the details.
Now, of course, if you don't come to this week's home game, you can always go to our home game against Brisbane on June 10, or failing that, Carlton, but that's to be advised.
Yeah, that did actually catch me off guard, the fact that they haven't really announced the specifics of the second half of the season yet.
Round 14 we have the bye, and but, it's all about that match against West Coast. Oh, it's getting exciting.
I mean, I know you're being facetious, but that obviously has huge implications.
Were there to be an absolute demolishing of West Coast, Adam Simpson could find himself on the scrap heap, which would mean they would have a new coach for the following game against us. And you know what that means, God. Nick. You know what that means.
Well, we can see where you sit, whether you want Harley Reid or whether you want us to keep winning.
No. In this scenario, no tanking is required. So,
I've got to say, I am coming around to the idea of, I'm happy to... I want to see progress. I want to see development in the side. But I don't know, Harley Reid, mate, the more you read, the more you hear about him.
You're not watching the Carlton twos, are you? Because,
oh, God, no, I'm not that into it. Jeez.
All right, good.
But all I'm saying is you begin to warm up to the idea of, look, well, I don't want the spoon, but if the price is the spoon for this guy, then it might all be fine.
Look, all I did was I found a way where I couldn't feel guilty about West Coast winning.
Well, is this our sign-off? Is this me saying, well, a lot for us to look forward to here at Hawk Talk Pod HQ?
Hashtag sack Simpson. There you go.
Oh, my God. That is awful. You think about the motivations behind that. That is just one of the worst things I've heard.
I don't know how he keeps his job, to be honest, with some of their performances, but their injury list is ridiculous. And the only way I could think of Hawthorn actually getting the result that so many fans are keen for was if they did move him on.
Well, plenty to play out until we get to that. We've got our clash against Melbourne, Saturday, 4:35pm, mate. I don't know how we're going to go. Well, actually, no, it's a lie. I'm pretty confident that we might be rolled this week. Melbourne are a good club. We're on the build, the slow and steady build back to where we were. How are you feeling?
I hate Melbourne, mate. I hate it, and they're unbackable favourites.
Mate, it could make it all the sweeter when we do pinch that W. You just never know. That's why you got to rock up to the footy and support your team, because you never know. It could be your week to witness some pure magic. It could be a win over the D's. I guess we'll find out. Either way, we're going to be back next week to recap all the action right here on the Hawk Talk podcast. We are a happy team at Hawthorn.